What's up, everybody? Getting through life, 110 cards rated video at a time. We've done it 130 days in a row. Why not make it 131? I was going to press record and dump this recording like, man, I screwed up twice there. I don't care. Neither do you. Let's just look at Magic cards. It's Victimize. We've looked at Victimize here recently because I freaked out about it because I love this card. It's in like 3 of my commander decks, and I have played it to insane effect like multiple times. Recently, I love Victimize, but we just did it like a few days ago, so it doesn't count. Disrupting Scepter. Boy, you want to look at a card that doesn't look like it does anything. Like, it's terrible. But it turns out it's actually one of the, not one of the most busted, but like one of the actual most feared cards in old school Magic. This is 3 mana for an artifact. Pay 3 and tap it. Opponent must discard 1 card of his or her choice. Can only be used during controller's turn. So it says activate only during your turn, so kind of a sorcery speed activation. 3 mana to cast it, and then 3 mana to make them discard a card every turn. It seems like it's really bad, right? It seems terrible. Back in the day, this was in a lot of decks. This, I believe, was in at least one draft of The Deck by Brian Weissman. The first, net deck. The first deck that was on the internet that people copied and was like really, really popular and successful in tournaments. Brian Weissman himself was very successful in tournaments with the deck. And for a while, I do believe it played the one-of. It played a lot of one-ofs. Disrupting Scepter, because it is, in fact, extremely disrupting to actually resolve this card, especially in the long ago. Making them discard a card every turn. Eventually, they'll have no cards in their hand, right? Or they'll get down to top deck mode. They just cast the card they drew. Ain't that big of a deal. Disrupting Scepter becomes worse in that situation. But in the mid-game, Disrupting Scepter turned out to be great. It either gets a counterspell out of your opponent's hand, right? Because they have to counter Scepter or they'll lose a bunch more cards. Or it gets, 2, 3, 4 cards out of their hand over multiple turn cycles while you control the game with your counterspells and removal spells. And just kind of like grinds them down attrition style until they're in top deck mode. You're drawing cards. You're the deck, or whatever deck is playing this card. Back in the day when they're just, Magic was slower, power creep wasn't as much of a thing, our creatures weren't as good, Disrupting Scepter was actually a playable Magic card. As such, I'm going to give this card the honorary 5 of the day, and it's the first card of the day. So that might come back to bite me. I can only give out one of these per video. But the actual score on this card is probably like a 2.0 or something, like a 2.1, right? Card is just not good in a modern context, but there was a time where your opponent resolving a Disrupting Scepter would actually make you groan hard. I kind of want an Unlimited Edition one, but Unlimited Edition, it's still like $27, and a lot of that's because it's rare, but it's also in some ways because it's Disrupting Scepter, and this card does have like a place in Magic history. There are old school Magic players that love Disrupting Scepter. It did a lot for us back in the day. Next is Captivating Unicorn from Theros Beyond Death. 5 mana for a 4/4 unicorn with Constellation. That's the same thing as Eerie, sort of. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, tap a thing an opponent controls. 5 mana is too much for a tapper. It just is, man. It just is. Very drafty guy, but still a pretty beefy body. I'm going to give him a 2.2, something like that. Let's move on to Ancient Stirrings. We've done this card in the last maybe 20 or 30 videos too. Stirrings is quite good. We have talked about it. We'll move on to Brain Geyser. What do you give Brain Geyser? What do you actually see? This is why I shouldn't be passing out the honorary 5s. I'm trying to keep myself to one of those per video, which means that I could have just given Disrupting Scepter the 2.15 that it deserves, whatever, and then given Brain Geyser their honorary 5. But here I am stuck having to actually score Brain Geyser. This is 2 blue and an X for a sorcery. Target player must draw X cards. Don't you love that? They have to. No choice. They must draw. This is still $12 from Revised, which is a little bit wild. A little bit wild that this is still holding frame in terms of pricing. From beta, there's literally no price data for it. That's how rare it is. That's crazy. Brain Geyser good, though. Brain Geyser good. Look at that unlimited inking. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. You got $105 to spend. That's how much it's going to cost you. Yeah, draw X or force opponent to draw X. It's cute that by the time we got to Revise, we had already you know, shortened up the wording a little bit. Now it's just target player draws X cards. You're not as good as like Mind Spring or whatever. This does sometimes mill your opponent out, or maybe you have Underworld Dreams. You can make them draw a bunch of cards. That's what we did with it back in the day sometimes. But ultimately, Geyser, if I have to give it a real score, is like a 4.19 or something. Like it's not as good as it once was. I'll give it a 4.23. I'll give Brain Geyser a 4.23. This card is not actually very good, especially in light of other options that we might have. Wild to say it. Wild to say it. But just Brain Geyser's a sorcery. It's in a modern context, it's terrible. But you'll still, you know, see it from time to time. Next is a Gancho Exemplar. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/1 enchantment creature that is also a human samurai. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. So exalted for samurais or warriors you control. Okay. Kind of an on this, you know. It's not the worst ability in the world, but it's also, you know, pretty awful. So 2. I'll just throw a 2 on it. That's how I feel. Sedge Troll. Man, I love Sedge Troll. This is, have we done this before? I think we've done Sedge Troll before. I'm almost certain we've done Sedge Troll before. But I'm not completely certain. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/2 troll. You can pay a black and it regenerates. And while the controller of Sedge Troll has swamps in play, Sedge Troll gains +1/+1. So it's 3 mana for a 3/3 regenerate. And back in the day, you have to understand, those were unbelievable stats for the rate you're paying for the card, right? 3 mana for a 3/3 is more or less unheard of. That's not something we see very often, if ever. And the fact that it regenerates makes it like even harder to deal with. You know what I mean? Like it dies to, you know, terror or whatever, but you just, well, no, actually, I think if it dies to terror, it can't be regenerated. It's a bad choice, but still, you know, a very above rate creature for the time period that regenerates is amazing. It's so good. So, and still, you know, $3 from Revised. It's worth something. But I'm going to give this, it's tough. I'm going to give so many honorary 5s today. You know what I mean? So many. I'm going to give this a 4.39. Not as good as it once was, man. Just not the story that it once was. But still okay. It's still okay. It's still all right. Move on to Furnace Punisher from Phyrexia All-Be-One, an underplayed card in current standard. 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/3 Phyrexian warrior with menace. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, Furnace Punisher deals 2 damage to that player unless they control 2 or more basic lands. You can really get some people in standard with this. You really can, dude. And it's each player's upkeep. So you play it, and when you say go, it immediately like hits them for the 2 damage. That's cute. A 3 mana 3/3. We're just talking about how those used to be a rarity. Now you see them all the time with upside. This is one of those. A 3 mana 3/3 menace. Okay, we're getting there. We'll kind of take that. And you know, the 2 damage is easy enough to get in standard unless you're playing against monocolored decks. So I really do like this card. I'm gonna give it less than Sedge Troll because it doesn't regenerate, and that's basically the only reason. But it's like a 4.39. You know, like it's in the same territory. It really is. I think Furnace Punisher is a card that we could look at in like standard sideboards for playability, but that's a pretty niche application. And in Casual Commander, which is mostly why we're here, I don't think this is playable at all. So not a super high score. But I'll move on to Merkwood Spider from Lord of the Rings. This is a single green mana for a 1/1 spider with Death Touch. When it attacks, target legendary creature you control gains Death Touch till end of turn. You guys remember the other day I gave Typhoid Rats a 3.5? It's like a 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch is just kind of good. Just kind of okay. And this is a spider, goes in the spider decks, gives your Ishkana or whatever other spider legend you're using, you know, Death Touch when it attacks. That's cool. So I have to actually score this higher than a 3.5. 3.7. 3.75 even. You know, I like a 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch. This has a halfway relevant creature type in certain decks. And, you know, Commander decks have at least 1 legendary creature in them all the time. So that's actually not bad. It's not. Move on to Mountain. All basics get a 5. Don't count. Think Twice is up next. We just did this one recently. Find Finality from Guilds of Ravnica. The find half of this is a Golgari hybrid, 2 mana for a sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your yard to your hand. Finality is 6 mana, 4, a green, and a black for a sorcery. You may put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. So this is a sweeper on the one half, and then, you know, a double raised dead card advantage for 2 mana on the other half. This saw a fair amount of play when it was in Standard. I don't think it's going to see too much play in Commander or anything. I mean, you could make an argument for it. You could. But still, when we had access to this in Standard, a lot of Golgari decks played a 2 of this and just like basic mid-range lists, you know? And it's always been kind of good in that application. So turns out a sweeper stapled to card advantage is just going to be good. Choosing one of these modes, you'll probably be able to use one or the other of them depending on where you are in the game. You know, on the the chart, you know, like, is it good when you're ahead? Is it good when you're behind? Is it good when you're even? Like that little chart that we used to see as Magic players evaluating cards. You don't remember that? Good. It's like a 12-year-old thing. I don't even think it's that relevant anymore. But when you're behind, this card is just good. You know, it can either sweep or get you card advantage. When you're ahead, I guess maybe the fine half puts you even more ahead, but whatever. Still, good card. Gosh. I'm actually going to give this card a 5.1. I just think, you know, anytime you see a sweeper that's stapled to like a halfway decent upside or whatever, like, it's great. So good card. Good. I think it's good. Let's move on to Dryad of the Elysian Grove. This card we all know is good. 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 2/4 nymph enchantment creature. You may play additional land on each of your turns. Land you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So all your lands tap for whatever mana you want them to. And you immediately have domain, right? Which is, I guess, neat. But the best thing here is usually, you know, 3 mana green creatures that let you play an additional land on your turns are just highly sought after. It's going to be no different. You know, it's $7 to buy the lowest price version of this card. I guess this one is $6.29. The one from MH3 Commander, and it looks okay, but I'm always going to love this lounging lunatic right here. Just like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you walked in on him like this, and he's like, what are you looking at? I'm just sitting here, you know. So I like that about this one. Dryad gets a 7.34, somewhere in that range. Card's just very, very good, and we'll see Commander play forever, so love it. I feel like his left leg should be drawn up to his midsection and not his right leg. I feel like it's so much more inappropriate that you can just... Why? Wrong leg? Let's move to Out of Bounds. Technically the last card of the day, but I think we can work in a bonus card today. It's the end of the week. Out of Bounds is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an instant with assist. Another player can pay up to 3 of this spell's cost, and it counters target spell. Very cute. This is only ever printed in Battle Bond. It's like 20 cents. And I imagine on some boards, you'll find some other player that's like, yes, I will definitely pay. Let me pay some of that, baby, to like not have all of us lose right now. I think it's cute that it's like a work together counterspell, but ultimately it's still 4 mana counterspell, you know. If everyone else is like tapped out, then it's just terrible. Just not good. And if you have extra mana, I think it's entirely possible that like you announce your intention to cast this card and everyone else at the table knows that you have the mana to cast it. So they're just like, no, you pay it. Why don't you pay that? And that's probably how it's going to end up happening like some of the time. This is probably a trap, actually. I think it's trappy. I don't trust human nature enough for this to work out. But I guess, again, people just don't want to die. And if somebody's like doing the thing that's going to just reap everybody, reap and sow everyone at the table, you know, and harvest at the table at the same time, then like, yeah, someone will help you cast this. But ultimately, I think it's just worse than like a normal counterspell. So I'm going to give this like a 3.8 or something. I'm not fooled by it, I guess is what I'm saying. So let's look at the final card. Somebody's probably in the comment section going to have a story of some amazing time when, you know, they and the 2 other players at the table that aren't killing everyone right now decided to all team up. Actually, you can't do that. It's just one other player. Another player can pay. So still, you're going to have a story of when you and your friend teamed up to counter that spell. And I respect and appreciate that, but I still don't think the card's that good. So bonus card is Alrun, God of the Cosmos. This dude did not get the respect he deserved when he was in standard. First of all, look how awesome that art is. Look how awesome this like alternate art is. He looks so cool. But anyway, 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue for a 1/1 legendary god that gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each card foretold card that you own in exile. At the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, then reveal the top 2 cards of your library. Put all cards of the chosen type into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Sick. So good. So good. Now, obviously, you might not hit the card that, like, the type that you chose. Like, maybe I choose land, and it, you know, I flip over instant and a creature. You know what I mean? And that's not good. You know, or I choose instant and I hit land creature. That's not good. I get that. But often, you know, even in standard, because I played this card when it was in standard on the arena and like had a lot of fun with it. Sometimes you play this, it's like a 5/5. Like it's an easy 5/5. All you have to have is 4 cards in your hand. It's a 5/5. It's a 6/6. So it's like a pretty, you know, threatening creature when you play it. And then it gets you card advantage. And like if it stays in play over the course of multiple turns, it gets you extra card advantage, and you don't whiff that much. You really don't. If you name instant, you might get an instant depending on how you've constructed your deck. If you name land, you'll almost always get a land. That often happens. So I liked Alrund. I really liked Alrund when he was in standard, but just never got his due. I have to give this guy like a 4.4. You know what I mean? Like it's a 4. Well, let's go 4.68. A little bit higher than I want to rate him. 4.68 is fine. He can be a commander, but I think he's better as a member of the 99. You just have to find a good deck for him. That card advantage at end of turn every turn is okay, especially considering you can like scry or surveil or otherwise do things to know what's on top of your library. So it can draw you, you know, multiple cards if you set it up right. And I think Alrund is okay, but still like 4.6 something in that neighborhood. I think he's okay. I love you, bud, but I hated your epiphany. When you had that epiphany, that was like the worst thing that happened to standard, but I like you as a guy. Anyway, guys, that's it for the week. I will see you tomorrow morning. I'll be there. I'll be there. I can't really sing. I'll see you guys tomorrow, bright and early on Monday morning. Bye.